The summer air in Montgomery, Alabama, was thick and heavy that Friday evening. Streetlights flickered on as Marcus Hayes turned the corner onto Oakwood Drive, his boots dragging across the pavement after another grueling double shift. He was exhausted but proud. Every hour of overtime was for Clarissa, his wife of 6 years, and for the child they were expecting in just a few short weeks. Marcus never imagined this night would carve itself into the town's memory like a scar. Their two-story home sat quietly at the end of the cul-de-sac. From the outside, it looked like the dream. A small garden, a swing set already built for the baby, the front porch decorated with potted flowers Clarissa insisted on keeping alive. But as Marcus walked up the steps, keys jingling in his pocket, something unsettled him. The living room lights were off, yet a faint glow slipped from the crack under their bedroom door upstairs. He hesitated, frowning. Clarissa usually kept the lights low when she was tired, but there was something different about the way shadows shifted along the walls. Maybe she's just reading, he muttered to himself, climbing the stairs. The house was silent, too silent. When Marcus pushed open the bedroom door, his world shattered. Clarissa, his pregnant wife, lay tangled in the sheets with another man. And not just any man. Derek Collins, his childhood best friend, the boy who once shared his lunch in grade school, the teenager who played ball with him on hot summer nights, the man he trusted enough to welcome into his home. For a moment, time stopped. Marcus stood frozen in the doorway, his breath trapped in his chest, his heart pounding so violently it hurt. Clarissa? His voice cracked, raw with disbelief. Clarissa gasped, yanking the sheet around her swollen belly. Her face drained of color. Marcus, please. Derek shot up, half-dressed, scrambling for words. Man, listen, it's not. This ain't what it looks like. Not what it looks like. Marcus's voice rose, sharp as broken glass. He stepped into the room, every nerve lit with betrayal. You're in my bed, with my wife, who's carrying my child. Tell me, Derek, what the hell does it look like then? Clarissa burst into tears, clutching her belly as if to shield it. Marcus, I'm sorry. Please, just let me explain. Explain? Marcus's eyes blazed. Explain what? That the woman I've worked myself into the ground for, the woman I've built a future with, is lying to my face. Derek held up his hands, his voice low, trying to calm the storm. Marcus, don't do this. You've been gone all the time, man. You left her alone. She needed someone. Someone. Marcus cut him off, his fists clenching. You? My best friend? You think that makes it better? Clarissa sobbed, rocking slightly on the bed, torn between the two men. Marcus, I never meant for this to happen. I was lonely. I made a mistake. Please, don't. But Marcus couldn't hear her. Every word bounced off the walls of his mind, twisted into knives. The baby, their baby, was it even his? The thought pierced deeper than any blade. Tell me the truth, he demanded, his voice breaking. Is that child mine? Or is it his? Clarissa froze, tears streaking her face. Silence filled the room like poison. Clarissa, Marcus shouted, stepping closer. Answer me, she whispered, her voice trembling, almost inaudible. It might not be yours. The words detonated like dynamite. Marcus staggered back as if struck. The room spun, his vision tunneling, fury and heartbreak colliding into something dangerous. From the hallway, the neighbor's dog barked at the sudden noise. In the quiet Alabama night, life went on as normal. But inside the Hayes home, 30 minutes of rage, tears, and betrayal had just begun. The 30 minutes that would end with blood on the living room floor and a young mother never breathing again. For the neighbors who waved from their porches and saw Marcus mowing the lawn every Sunday morning, the Hayes family looked like the picture of stability. A hard-working husband, a glowing pregnant wife, and a future full of promise. It was the kind of life people in small towns whispered about with admiration. But behind the closed doors of the beige two-story house on Oakwood Drive, things weren't nearly as perfect as they seemed. Marcus and Clarissa's love story started like a fairy tale. They met in high school. He was the quiet athlete. She was the cheerleader with a radiant smile. They dated through senior year, and when Marcus landed steady work in construction, marriage seemed like the natural next step. At their wedding, Derek Collins stood right beside Marcus as best man, raising his glass to toast what everyone believed would be a lifelong union. For the first few years, life really was good. Marcus adored Clarissa, and Clarissa reveled in the comfort of being cared for. But time and responsibility change people. Bills stacked up. Marcus took on longer hours, sometimes working weekends, convinced he was building the kind of security his father had never been able to provide. He came home with aching muscles and dirt still clinging to his boots, collapsing into bed while Clarissa ate dinner alone. At first, Clarissa understood. She told herself it was temporary, that all the late nights and empty dinners would be worth it when the baby came. But as months turned into years, the loneliness grew heavier. The house echoed too loudly when Marcus wasn't home. Nights stretched on with only the television for company, and Clarissa began to feel like she was fading into the wallpaper. And then there was Derek. Derek wasn't just Marcus's best friend. He was practically family. He came over often to watch football, barbecue on weekends, or just hang around when Marcus was busy. Clarissa remembered him from their teenage years, a joker with a crooked smile who always had an easy way of making people laugh. Where Marcus was stoic and steady, Derek was carefree, charismatic, and attentive in ways Marcus no longer had time to be. It started small, friendly conversations in the kitchen while Derek grabbed a beer, laughter over old high school memories. Clarissa told herself it was harmless. After all, Derek had always been around. But as Marcus worked longer hours, Derek lingered more. He asked Clarissa how she was doing, if she was eating enough, how the pregnancy was going. Those simple questions, the kind Marcus often forgot in his exhaustion, felt like water to a woman starving for attention. One rainy afternoon, when Marcus was stuck on a job site, Derek stopped by to drop off tools Marcus had left in his truck. Clarissa invited him in. They ended up sitting at the dining table for hours, talking about everything. Her fears about motherhood, Derek's regrets about never settling down, how life hadn't turned out the way either of them expected. When Clarissa's tears spilled over, Derek reached for her hand. That moment cracked something open. Guilt gnawed at Clarissa from the start. She told herself she could stop it, that it would never go too far. But loneliness is a dangerous companion, and temptation, once given a foothold, grows stronger with every stolen glance and every late-night text. Before long, the line had been crossed, and what began as comfort turned into betrayal. She hated herself for it. Each time she looked at Marcus, his tired eyes and calloused hands, she felt the weight of her deception pressing down. And yet, she couldn't stop. Part of her clung to Derek's attention, the validation that she was still seen, still desired. The other part prayed Marcus would never find out. As her belly grew, so did the lies. She rehearsed stories in her head, just in case Marcus ever asked too many questions. She convinced herself that once the baby came, things would go back to normal, that the affair would fade into the shadows like a bad dream. But deep down, Clarissa knew the truth she feared most. She couldn't say with certainty whose child she was carrying. That secret kept her awake at night. She would lie beside Marcus, listening to the rhythm of his breathing, and wonder how much longer she could hide the storm brewing inside her. Every kick of the baby was a reminder, not only of new life, but of the web of betrayal she was tangled in. To the outside world, Clarissa still smiled at church, still waved to the neighbors, still posted photos of baby clothes on Facebook. But inside, she was unraveling. The guilt was suffocating. And the closer she got to her due date, the closer she came to the inevitable collision between truth and exposure. When Marcus walked into that bedroom on the night of July 14th, the collision came crashing down. In a single moment, every hidden choice, every stolen touch, every lie she told herself exploded into reality. And in the 30 minutes that followed, all the years of love, loyalty, and sacrifice would combust into a tragedy so violent it would leave an entire town reeling. The silence that followed Clarissa's whispered confession was unbearable. Her words, "It might not be yours," hung in the air like a death sentence. Marcus felt them echo in his skull, ringing louder than the pounding of his own heartbeat. He stumbled back a step, his chest rising and falling like he was drowning. For years he had worked, sweated, sacrificed for this family, for this child, and now he wasn't even sure the life growing inside his wife belonged to him. "Say it again," Marcus demanded, his voice raw. "Say it louder. Tell me this baby ain't mine." Clarissa's lips trembled. "Marcus, I don't know. Please, I didn't mean for." "You don't know?" His voice cracked like thunder. "How the hell do you not know, Clarissa?" Derek stepped forward, his hands raised as though he could hold the storm back. Man, you need to calm down. Don't you dare. Marcus's eyes snapped to him, blazing. Don't you dare speak to me like you didn't crawl into my bed, with my wife, in my house. The tension in the room was a live wire, sparking, waiting for something to ignite it. Clarissa sobbed, clutching her belly as if she could shield the unborn child from the fury around her. Marcus, I swear, I never wanted this. I was lonely. I was scared. You were never home. Marcus cut her off, his voice shaking with rage. Don't you dare blame me for this. I worked every damn day to give you everything we never had growing up. I broke my back so you didn't have to. And this is what I come home to. His hands trembled, fists half-formed, his jaw tight with restraint. But beneath it all, grief carved into his features. I loved you, he whispered, the words almost to himself. I trusted you. Clarissa reached toward him, her face drenched in tears. I do love you, Marcus. I swear I do. This was a mistake, a terrible mistake. Marcus jerked away from her touch, his voice rising again. A mistake? That's what you call it. Months of lying, sneaking, sleeping with him under my nose. And you call it a mistake? Derek finally snapped, his own anger surfacing. Enough, man. She doesn't deserve you tearing her apart like this. She's pregnant, for God's sake. The words only fueled Marcus's rage. He lunged toward Derek, shoving him hard against the dresser. A picture frame toppled, glass shattering across the floor. You don't get to talk about what she deserves. Marcus spat, his face inches from Derek's. You don't get to preach to me about anything. You betrayed me worse than anyone ever could. Derek shoved back, his voice low and dangerous. Maybe you should have been the husband she needed, instead of some ghost working 20 hours a day. The room spun with chaos. Clarissa screamed for them to stop, her voice breaking. Please, stop. This isn't helping. But it was too late. The 30 minutes that began with betrayal were unraveling into violence. Marcus turned back to Clarissa, his chest heaving. I just need to know one thing, he said, his voice hoarse. Whose baby is it? Mine or his? Clarissa's sobs filled the silence. She shook her head, unable to give him the certainty he craved. That silence cut deeper than any blade. Rage surged through Marcus like fire. He grabbed the nearest object, the lamp from the nightstand, and hurled it across the room. It exploded against the wall, shards scattering. Clarissa screamed again, stumbling toward the doorway, her hands outstretched. Marcus, please, don't do this. I'm begging you, think of the baby. Her words hit him like a slap. The baby. The child that might not even be his. Think of the baby? Marcus roared. You should have thought of the baby when you laid down with him. Clarissa's knees buckled, her sobs racking her body. I'm sorry, she cried. I'm so sorry. The apology wasn't enough. Not anymore. In the chaos, Marcus shoved past Derek and stormed into the living room. His hands shook violently, his mind spinning out of control. Clarissa followed, her cries echoing off the walls. Please, Marcus, don't leave. Don't walk out on me now. But he wasn't leaving. He was cornered in his own home, his world torn apart, and something inside him snapped. The argument turned into a blur, screams, accusations, the sound of fists against walls. Clarissa tried to reach him, to calm him, but every word she spoke sounded like poison in his ears. And then it happened. In the frenzy of shoving and shouting, Clarissa stumbled. Her body hit the edge of the coffee table, the sharp corner striking her side. She cried out, collapsing onto the floor. Blood spread quickly across her nightgown, pooling beneath her swollen belly. Marcus froze, the world going silent. Derek shouted her name, dropping to his knees, but it was too late. Clarissa's breaths came in shallow gasps, her eyes wide with shock and terror. Marcus, she whispered, her voice fading. I never stopped loving you. And then she was still. Marcus stood motionless, his hands trembling, his chest heaving with disbelief. In 30 minutes, the life he built, the woman he loved, the child he dreamed of, gone. All because of betrayal, rage, and a truth too unbearable to hold. The living room smelled of copper and fear. Clarissa's body lay motionless on the floor, her nightgown soaked in red. Marcus dropped to his knees beside her, his trembling hands hovering above her belly as if afraid to touch. He wanted to believe it wasn't real, that she would take a breath, cry out, scold him for overreacting. But the silence pressed in, suffocating. Derek's voice broke through the haze, frantic and hoarse. "We need help. Call 911. Marcus stared at him, eyes vacant. "I didn't mean." "Now," Derek roared, already fumbling for his phone. His fingers shook as he dialed, his voice cracking as he shouted into the receiver. "A woman's been hurt. She's bleeding bad. Hurry, please, hurry." Outside, the neighborhood was alive. Dogs barked. Porch lights flicked on. Curtains shifted as neighbors peeked out, drawn by the shouting. Within minutes, the distant wail of sirens sliced through the humid Alabama night. Red and blue lights washed over the quiet cul-de-sac as police cruisers screeched to a stop. Paramedics rushed inside, their boots thudding across the hardwood floor. They dropped to Clarissa's side, their voices urgent, clipped. "Female, late 20s, pregnant, she's not breathing." One medic worked compressions, another checked for fetal heartbeat. But the looks they exchanged told the truth before words could. Both lives were slipping away. Marcus sat frozen, his back against the wall, his face pale and streaked with sweat. He watched as strangers pressed down on his wife's chest, watched as they shook their heads almost imperceptibly. And then one word ended everything. Time of death, 11:47 p.m. The room spun. Marcus pressed his fists into his temples, rocking slightly, whispering, "No, no, no, no." Two officers pulled Derek aside, demanding answers. His voice shook as he told them everything. How Marcus had walked in, how the confrontation escalated, how Clarissa fell. His words poured out like fire, painting Marcus as a man consumed by rage. The officers turned to Marcus. "Sir, we need you to stand up." Marcus blinked at them, disoriented. I didn't mean to hurt her." "Stand up," the officer repeated, firmer this time. They pulled him to his feet, his wrists trembling as the cold steel of handcuffs clicked into place. Neighbors stood outside, whispering in clusters, their faces pale in the flashing lights. Mrs. Green from across the street clutched her robe tighter, shaking her head. "I thought they were perfect," she murmured. "I thought they had it all." Reporters hadn't yet arrived, but word spread quickly in towns like Montgomery. Within hours, everyone would know that the couple they'd admired was shattered, their story turned into a nightmare. As Marcus was let out the front door, he saw the garden he'd planted for Clarissa, the baby swing he'd assembled on weekends. Everything he'd built, now meaningless. His neighbors' eyes burned into him, some full of pity, others with judgment. At the edge of the lawn, he stopped, his voice breaking as he begged the officers. Please tell me the baby's okay." One of the medics looked up, his face solemn. He didn't need to say the words. Marcus knew. A sob tore from his throat, raw and guttural, echoing through the night. The officers pushed him gently into the back of the cruiser. The door slammed shut, sealing him inside. Through the window, Marcus could see Derek standing on the porch, his face hidden in his hands. For a brief second, Marcus felt the fury rise again. If Derek hadn't been there, none of this would have happened. But the fury quickly drowned in grief. As the cruiser pulled away, Marcus pressed his forehead against the glass, watching his house grow smaller, swallowed by flashing lights. It was no longer a home, it was a crime scene. Yellow tape would soon wrap around the porch, investigators would photograph every corner, and the Hayes family name would be dragged through every headline. Down at the station, Marcus would repeat the same words over and over, as if saying them enough times might turn them true. "I didn't mean to kill her. I just wanted the truth." But no repetition could change the fact that Clarissa was gone, the baby was gone, and the man who had once been a husband and soon-to-be father was now a prisoner, his future reduced to a chain of concrete walls and iron bars. Back on Oakwood Drive, the flashing lights faded. Neighbors drifted back inside, shaken, clutching their children tighter, whispering to one another about how quickly love can turn to violence. The little house with the swing set stood in silence, holding the echo of 30 minutes that had destroyed everything. And in the dark, Montgomery itself seemed to mourn, a community forever altered by the choices made inside one family's walls. The courthouse in downtown Montgomery buzzed with reporters, cameras flashing as if the trial had already begun before Marcus Hayes ever stepped inside. It had been 3 months since that July night, but the community hadn't stopped whispering. To some, Marcus was a murderer who snapped in a jealous rage. To others, he was a broken man, a husband betrayed, pushed past his breaking point. Everyone wanted answers, but only the courtroom could decide. Marcus walked into the chamber in a faded suit, his wrists no longer cuffed, but his posture heavy with the weight of what he had lost. His eyes searched the gallery, catching the stares of Clarissa's family, faces etched with grief and fury. Her mother clutched a tissue in one hand, glaring at him with the other. On the opposite side sat his own parents, stoic, their shoulders pressed together as if holding each other upright. When the judge entered and called the room to order, the air thickened. This wasn't just another criminal case. It was the unraveling of what had once been a love story. The prosecution painted Marcus as a man driven by anger. They laid out the narrative with brutal clarity. A husband walked in on his pregnant wife with another man, exploded in fury, and in less than 30 minutes left her and their unborn child dead. They highlighted the broken lamp, the bruises on Clarissa's arms, the shattered furniture, all pointing to violence spiraling out of control. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the prosecutor's voice rang with conviction. Marcus Hayes didn't just lose his temper. He chose to let his rage consume him. He chose to turn his wife's betrayal into a death sentence. And tonight, we are here to give justice to Clarissa Hayes and the child she carried. Marcus's lawyer, a weary man named William Carter, rose to speak for the defense. His tone was softer, pleading, heavy with humanity. Marcus Hayes is not a monster, he told the jury. He is a man who devoted his life to his wife, who sacrificed every day to give her stability. That night, he discovered a betrayal so profound it shattered him. He didn't plan this. He didn't intend this. It was a tragic accident born from heartbreak, not murder. The testimonies began. Neighbors spoke about the yelling, the crashes, the 30 minutes of chaos that had spilled into the night. Mrs. Green described hearing Marcus's voice breaking, his words like thunder through the walls. Another neighbor recalled seeing Clarissa through the window earlier that day, smiling as she watered her plants, never imagining she'd be gone before sunrise. The medical examiner's testimony cut deepest. He described the trauma from the fall, the blood loss, the way the sharp edge of the coffee table struck her. His voice was clinical, detached, but the jury shifted uneasily in their seats as he concluded. The injuries were consistent with forceful impact. While accidental falls are possible, in this context, during a violent altercation, they align with homicide. When Derek took the stand, the room seemed to hold its breath. He looked worn, guilt etched across his features. His voice was low, steady at first, as he described the fight. Marcus snapped. He was yelling, throwing things, pushing me. Clarissa tried to calm him down, but he wouldn't hear it. Then she fell. It all happened so fast. The prosecutor pressed him. Mr. Collins, in your opinion, was Marcus in control of his actions? Derek hesitated, eyes flicking toward Marcus, then back at the jury. No, he wasn't himself. He was gone. The defense cross-examined, seizing on those words. You said he wasn't himself. Would you say Marcus acted with intent to kill? Derek faltered. I don't know. The tension crackled, the courtroom hanging on every pause. Finally, it was Marcus's turn. When he took the stand, his voice trembled, his hands twisting in his lap. I love Clarissa. I swear to God, I loved her more than anything. I worked every day so she wouldn't have to want for anything. When I walked in that night, I lost myself. I begged her to tell me the truth. I never wanted to hurt her. The prosecutor's voice cut sharp. But you did hurt her. And she's gone. Isn't that right, Mr. Hayes? Marcus's eyes filled with tears. She's gone, he whispered. And so is our baby. And I'll carry that for the rest of my life. His words hung in the chamber, heavy and raw. Some jurors looked down. Others stared at him as if searching for the line between grief and guilt. As the trial stretched on, the arguments circled like vultures. Was Marcus a grieving husband who made a terrible mistake, or a jealous man who let his rage take a life? The prosecution insisted he crossed a line no husband had the right to cross. The defense begged for mercy, reminding the jury that one impulsive moment did not define an entire man's life. By the end of the day, the gallery buzzed with whispers. Families clutched each other tighter, reporters scribbled notes, and Marcus sat silently at the defense table, his head bowed, his fate hanging in the balance. The jury's decision was still days away, but one truth was undeniable. The love story of Marcus and Clarissa Hayes had been stripped bare in front of strangers, their private failures now the subject of public judgment. And no matter the verdict, nothing could bring her back. Nothing could change the 30 minutes that had rewritten both of their lives forever. The courtroom was hushed as the jury filed back into their seats. Days of testimony, hours of deliberation, and now the weight of a man's future balanced on the foreman's words. Marcus sat rigid at the defense table, his hands clasped so tightly his knuckles whitened. His lawyer leaned in, whispering something meant to soothe, but the words didn't land. All Marcus could hear was the faint echo of Clarissa's last breath, the whisper that haunted him. "I never stopped loving you." The judge asked if the jury had reached a verdict. The foreman, a middle-aged man with solemn eyes, stood. "We have, Your Honor." The silence deepened. Even the air seemed still. On the charge of second-degree murder, the foreman began, "We find the defendant, Marcus Hayes, guilty." Gasps rippled through the gallery. Clarissa's mother let out a wail, clutching her daughter's photo to her chest. Marcus's father closed his eyes, shoulders slumping as though the weight of the world had finally crushed him. Marcus himself sat motionless, the word guilty ringing in his ears like a church bell that would never stop tolling. His lawyer placed a hand on his arm, but Marcus barely felt it. He wasn't surprised. Deep down, he'd known this was coming. He'd seen the way the jury looked at him, torn between pity and condemnation. In their eyes, he wasn't just a husband who lost control. He was the man who had ended 2 lives. The judge's gavel struck. Sentencing will proceed immediately. The prosecution argued for the maximum penalty, emphasizing the violence, the unborn child, the irrevocable loss. He didn't just kill a wife, the prosecutor thundered. He killed a mother and an innocent child who never had the chance to take its first breath. Justice demands nothing less than life in prison. When it was the defense's turn, William Carter's voice was soft, heavy with resignation. "Marcus Hayes is already living in a prison far crueler than any we can construct. Every morning, he wakes to the reality that his wife is gone, that his child is gone, that his own hands played a role. He is not asking for freedom. He is asking for mercy." Marcus rose to speak before sentencing. His voice was quiet, hoarse from nights of sleepless grief. "I can't undo what happened. I wish I could trade places with her and the baby. I wish I could go back to that night and walk out the door instead of fighting. But I can't. All I can do is live with it. And I will. Every single day." The judge's face was grave, eyes steady as he delivered the sentence. "Marcus Hayes, this court sentences you to life in prison without the possibility of parole." The gavel fell with finality. Marcus swayed slightly, his breath shallow, but he didn't protest. He bowed his head as deputies placed cuffs around his wrists once more. The clink of metal was the last sound he heard before being led from the courtroom. In the gallery, Clarissa's family wept openly. Her mother whispered, "Justice for Clarissa," though the words trembled, as if justice could never feel whole when her daughter's laugh would never echo through their home again. On the other side, Marcus's parents sat in stunned silence. His mother pressed a handkerchief to her mouth, stifling sobs. His father stared straight ahead, eyes glassy, as though trying to memorize every detail of his son's face before he was gone. Reporters rushed outside to file their stories, microphones thrust toward anyone willing to speak. Some painted Marcus as a villain, others as a broken man consumed by grief. Headlines would soon spin their own truths, but the people who mattered most, the families, were left with only pain. That night, the streets of Montgomery hummed with gossip. At diners, at church gatherings, in grocery aisles, people whispered, could it have been avoided? Was he truly evil, or just human? The answers varied, but one fact remained unchanged. 2 lives were gone, and another was locked away forever. Inside his cell weeks later, Marcus sat on the thin mattress, staring at the concrete wall. He replayed the trial, the verdict, the sentencing, over and over, but none of it cut as deep as the memory of Clarissa's voice in those final moments. He held on to that whisper, "I never stopped loving you," as both comfort and curse. Clarissa's grave, meanwhile, became a place of pilgrimage. Friends left flowers. Strangers stopped by, some out of sympathy, others out of morbid curiosity. A small teddy bear sat beside her headstone, a silent symbol of the child who never came into the world. The 2 families avoided each other in town. Too much had been said, too much had been lost. At church, if they crossed paths, eyes turned away, each side carrying grief in its own unbearable form. The trial was over, the sentence delivered, but the story was far from finished. For the Hayes family, the verdict closed one chapter but opened a lifetime of what-ifs. For Clarissa's family, the wound of betrayal and loss would never heal. And for Marcus, prison was not just walls and bars. It was the endless replay of 30 minutes that destroyed everything he once loved. No verdict, no sentence, no words from a judge could rewrite what happened in that house. The tragedy lived on, carved into memory, echoing through the halls of a courthouse, whispered across small-town porches, and locked inside the heart of a man who had lost it all. Derek Collins never set foot in the courthouse again after the verdict. He slipped out of town quietly, leaving behind the neighborhood that had once treated him like family. But whispers followed him everywhere. In Montgomery, people spoke his name with bitterness, labeling him a traitor who had broken not only the sacred trust between friends, but the very foundation of a marriage. He was alive, free, but marked. Derek rented a small apartment in Birmingham, a city far enough to escape the constant stares, yet close enough that the weight of his choices never lifted. Every night, he replayed the moment Clarissa reached for him, the moments he had convinced himself were harmless until they weren't. He knew Marcus bore the brunt of the punishment, but guilt made Derek a prisoner of a different kind. Friends cut ties, jobs slipped through his fingers, and he carried the shame like a brand he could never scrub clean. Some nights he sat at his kitchen table with a bottle, staring at his phone. His thumb hovered over Marcus's prison number more times than he could count. But what would he say? "I'm sorry." The words felt useless, too small against the enormity of what they had destroyed. He told himself silence was mercy, but deep down he knew it was cowardice. While Derek drifted in self-imposed exile, Marcus lived in a cage of concrete and iron. Life in prison was stripped of all the noise of the outside world, but it was far from quiet inside his head. He ate his meals in silence, walked the yard with his eyes down, and avoided trouble not out of fear, but out of exhaustion. What fight was left in him after that night? The guards noticed he rarely spoke. Inmates noticed too. They called him names, some mocking, some cruel. "Baby killer," one hissed once in the cafeteria line. Marcus didn't flinch. He just kept moving, his tray shaking in his hands. The words weren't new. They were only echoes of what he already told himself every day. At night, he scribbled in a battered notebook the prison chaplain had given him. Sometimes prayers, sometimes letters addressed to Clarissa that would never be sent. In one entry he wrote, "I don't know if you can see me, Clarissa, but if you can, I hope you know I'm sorry. I should have walked away. I should have been stronger. I didn't just lose you. I lost myself. I lost the father I was supposed to be. Maybe God will forgive me one day, but I don't think I ever will." He underlined those last words so hard the pen tore the paper. The chaplain visited him often, offering scripture, telling him redemption was still possible. Marcus listened, but said little. Faith was a language he struggled to trust now. He still carried Clarissa's final whisper, "I never stopped loving you." Sometimes it was a lifeline. Sometimes it was the cruelest punishment. Prison clocks moved slowly, but Marcus's mind was frozen in those 30 minutes, over and over. He told himself that if he had left the house, if he had gone to a motel, if he had done anything but stay, Clarissa would still be alive. That baby might have been his, or it might not, but now he would never know. Outside those walls, Montgomery moved on. But inside, time had no mercy. Marcus aged in silence, his body stiffening from years on a thin mattress, his hands roughened from prison work. Yet no physical burden outweighed the one he carried in his chest. The weight of love turned to rage, and the cost of that one irreversible night. And so, Derek lived with shame beyond bars, and Marcus with guilt inside them. Both men, in different prisons, haunted by the same woman, by the same 30 minutes that ended a life and destroyed two others. The tragedy of the Hayes family wasn't just confined to prison walls or courthouse transcripts. It seeped into the fabric of Montgomery itself. At Sunday services, the pastor spoke carefully, reminding his congregation that sin wore many faces: betrayal, rage, silence. Some nodded, others shook their heads, still too raw to hear Clarissa's name spoken aloud. For weeks, the church pew where she once sat remained empty, a silent reminder of the life cut short. Neighbors remembered Clarissa not only as the woman at the center of headlines, but as the smiling young wife who used to water her flowers every morning. Mrs. Green, who lived across the street, often replayed their last conversation. Clarissa had mentioned how nervous she was about motherhood, how she hoped the baby would have Marcus's eyes. She was scared, but excited, Mrs. Green recalled later. No one could have guessed what was about to happen. That detail haunted the community. The juxtaposition of a young mother preparing for life, even as her own was nearing its end. Then came a discovery that deepened the wound. Weeks after her death, while packing away her belongings, Clarissa's sister found a small spiral notebook in the drawer of her nightstand. Inside were pages of half-written thoughts, some crossed out, some smudged by tears. Among them was a draft of a letter she had never sent to Marcus. It read, "Marcus, I know I've failed you. You've given me everything, stability, a home, a future, and yet I let loneliness consume me. I don't know how to tell you about my mistakes, because I know they could break you. But please believe me when I say I never stopped loving you. I want this baby to be our fresh start. I want to make it right. Please, if you can, forgive me." The letter ended abruptly, the ink trailing off as if she had been interrupted. She never delivered it. The discovery spread through town like wildfire, stirring even more conflict in how people viewed her. To some, it was proof she had truly loved Marcus, that she regretted everything and wanted redemption. To others, it was too little, too late, words that would never undo the betrayal. The notebook was eventually given to Marcus's parents, who wept over the faded handwriting. His mother, with trembling fingers, traced the words, whispering, "If only he'd seen this before that night." But it was only another cruel twist of fate, a truth discovered when it was already too late to change anything. Even the local police chief admitted in a quiet interview, "This case broke people. It wasn't just a crime. It was a mirror held up to all of us. What do you do when love fails? When secrets eat away at the things you build? Most of us pray we'll never find out." Derek's name, too, became a bitter warning passed down in conversation. Parents told their children about loyalty, about how quickly trust could be destroyed. "Don't ever be a Derek," some fathers warned their sons. It wasn't just Marcus who was judged. It was the man who stood beside him as best man, and later beside his wife in betrayal. In every corner of town, people carried their own version of the story. To Clarissa's family, she was the victim of a man's uncontrollable rage. To Marcus's family, she was the woman he had loved enough to lose his future for. And to the community, she was both saint and sinner, a reminder that people are never as perfect as they appear through the windows of a tidy suburban home. The notebook was eventually tucked away, not displayed in court, not made public in full. But for those who had read it, the words lingered. Clarissa had wanted forgiveness. She had wanted a chance to fix what she broke. That chance was gone now, but her final, unspoken wish added another layer of sorrow to an already unbearable tragedy. In the end, the community did what small towns always do. The whispers grew softer with time, the stares became less sharp, and life moved forward. But the swing set still stood in the Hayes yard, untouched, a rusting monument to the family that never got to be. And in the quiet of Montgomery nights, when the cicadas hummed and the houses slept, people still wondered, not just about what Marcus did or what Clarissa hid, but about the fragile line that separates love from destruction. The families on both sides were left carrying wounds that would never fully close. For Clarissa's parents, grief turned their home into a mausoleum of memories. Her mother refused to pack away her daughter's clothes, insisting that the scent of lavender detergent still clinging to the fabric was all she had left. Every morning, she walked past the nursery Clarissa had begun to decorate, its walls painted pale yellow, a crib still waiting in the corner. She would pause there, her hand gripping the doorframe, whispering to the grandchild she would never meet. Her father, once a lively man, grew quiet and withdrawn. He sat most evenings on the porch with an old photo album, flipping through images of Clarissa as a child, her first day of school, her cheerleader uniform, her wedding day where she had glowed in white lace. He spoke little, but his silence said more than words, that he carried not only grief, but a bitterness he couldn't shake. "She trusted the wrong people," he muttered once to a neighbor, "and she paid for it with her life." For Marcus's parents, the tragedy was layered with shame. They loved their son, But the community saw them differently now. In the grocery store, whispers followed them. At church, hands once offered in friendship were folded tightly, as if withholding forgiveness. His mother cried at night, praying for her son's soul, torn between defending him and acknowledging the devastation he caused. His father, a proud man who had taught Marcus to work hard and provide, struggled with the idea that his son's legacy would forever be tied not to his labor, but to his violence. Family gatherings became strained. Relatives avoided certain topics. Children were hushed when they asked innocent questions like, "Where's Uncle Marcus?" Or, "Why don't we see Aunt Clarissa anymore?" The answers were swallowed, replaced by awkward silence. And then there was the absence of the child, the baby who never took its first breath. Both families grieved that loss in different ways. For Clarissa's mother, the baby was a piece of her daughter that might have lived on. For Marcus's parents, it was the grandchild they had prayed for, a continuation of their family line, now erased. The empty swing set in Marcus and Clarissa's yard became a symbol of that loss, swaying in the wind, mocking the dreams that would never come true. Sometimes, Clarissa's mother and Marcus's mother would see each other at the cemetery, standing yards apart. Both women carried flowers, both wept quietly, but neither spoke. The gulf between them was too wide. Each blamed the other's child for the tragedy. Each carried a grief too heavy to share. Even Derek's name lingered like a ghost. He was gone from Montgomery, but not from their conversations. Clarissa's father cursed his betrayal. Marcus's father called him a coward. Yet both families knew that even without Derek, the cracks in Marcus and Clarissa's marriage had been real, the loneliness and silence too strong to ignore. The tragedy reshaped them all. Holidays were no longer celebrations, but reminders of empty chairs. Birthdays passed without candles. Anniversaries marked not love, but loss. And in the small Alabama town, the Hayes and the Thompsons lived parallel lives of sorrow, close enough to feel each other's presence, but too broken to ever bridge the distance. The baby who never lived, the daughter who would never grow old, the son who would never be free. These were the legacies the families carried. And as the years stretched on, the tragedy hardened into something unspoken but ever-present, a shadow cast over every gathering, every prayer, every quiet evening spent wondering what could have been. The story of Marcus and Clarissa Hayes didn't end with the clang of a prison door. It lived on, lingering like smoke in the streets of Montgomery, whispered in coffee shops and Sunday sermons, retold with lowered voices in grocery store aisles. Some saw Marcus as a cautionary tale about unchecked anger. Others saw him as a tragic figure, destroyed by betrayal and grief. But no matter the perspective, the truth was the same. A family once admired was gone, reduced to ashes. Clarissa's grave became a silent meeting place for grief. Her mother visited often, kneeling in the grass, speaking to her daughter as if she might still hear. "You deserved better, baby girl," she whispered once, leaving behind a bouquet of lilies. A small white teddy bear, placed by a neighbor, stood at the headstone as a permanent reminder of the child who never opened its eyes. To Clarissa's family, she was frozen in time, young, expectant, robbed of both motherhood and future. Marcus, meanwhile, began his new existence behind prison walls. In those first months, he kept to himself, eating in silence, spending hours alone in his cell. Some inmates mocked him, calling him the wife killer, but he barely reacted. His punishment was not just confinement, it was memory. Every night, as the lights dimmed and the hum of the prison quieted, Marcus replayed that July evening. He saw her face, her tears, her final words. He thought about the baby that never had a chance. And he whispered apologies to the ceiling, words that never reached the ears he wanted them to. Letters trickled in at first, some from strangers who believed he was unjustly condemned, others from people who despised him. He read them all, but one kind cut deeper. The letters from Clarissa's family, returned unopened, not accepted, scrawled across the envelopes. The wall between the two families was permanent, as solid as the bars of his cell. For the community, the case became a lesson in the fragility of appearances. On the surface, the Hayes marriage had seemed perfect, a hard-working husband, a glowing pregnant wife, a tidy house on Oakwood Drive. But perfection had been only a mask. Behind it, loneliness festered, resentment grew, and secrets multiplied until the mask shattered. People who once Envied the couple now shook their heads, warning their children about what happens when lies and silence take root. Some blamed Clarissa for her betrayal. Others condemned Derek for violating the bond of brotherhood and trust. But most placed the ultimate responsibility on Marcus for letting rage speak louder than reason. And yet, even those who judged him harshly could not deny the tragedy. A man who had once been a devoted husband and soon-to-be father had lost everything in half an hour. The trial, the verdict, the sentencing, they were chapters in a story no one would forget. But the larger question remained, whispered in the minds of everyone who heard it. What would I have done in his place? If you walked in on the person you loved most, carrying your child, betraying you in the deepest way possible, would you have walked away? Or would you, too, have lost yourself in the fire of rage? That is what makes the story of Marcus and Clarissa so haunting. It isn't just about crime and punishment. It's about love, betrayal, choices, and the terrible cost when emotion overtakes reason. In the end, Montgomery moved on, as towns do. New scandals rose, new headlines replaced the old. But for those who knew the couple, the image never faded. Marcus led away in handcuffs, Clarissa lying still on the living room floor, the life they'd built scattered like glass across the hardwood. Marcus will likely spend the rest of his life behind bars, aging in the shadows of his memories. Clarissa will remain forever 29, her story etched into stone. The child they were supposed to raise together will remain only a phantom dream, a name never spoken. The tragedy of the Hayes family is more than a crime. It is a reminder that betrayal can cut deeper than any blade, that secrets can poison even the strongest bond, and that a single moment of rage can destroy everything we hold dear. And so, as the story closes, the question lingers, unsettling and unavoidable. When faced with heartbreak so profound, when truth collides with love and rage, which path would you choose? The door or the destruction?